Good afternoon. You're welcome. My name is Naomi Wandera. I am the Senior Research and Evaluation Specialist at the International Center for Research on Women. Today, I will be moderating this session. Welcome. I will start by, giving some of the housekeeping, just housekeeping instructions. So today we are recording and we hope that we have your consent to continue with recording. We'll be able to share with you the video at the end of this session. Kindly keep your microphone muted only when we ask questions and you're allowed to speak, or you have a question to ask, you can raise your hand and mute yourself at that time. So whenever you're not speaking, kindly switch off your microphone. Please send all your questions through the chat box anytime during the presentation. We may not get all the questions today, but we'll make it a point to compile all the questions and all the discussions and reach out to everyone at the end of the meeting. So we will be having a breakout session at some point. Along the way, we'll show you the instructions on how to get into the breakout sessions. So please be on the lookout for when that time comes. Today, this webinar is really looking at the economic rights of women and how we can work to advance women's land and property rights. The structure of our presentation, kindly slow down with the movements, yes. So the structure of our webinar today is that we are going to have panelists, and I will introduce them shortly. We shall also have moderators who will be able to assist the audience in the breakout sessions. And we also have organizations that we've partnered with who will be making some remarks at some point. Next slide, please. So I will now go to the next slide and introduce some of our partners. Frances Bilungi. Frances, are you in the meeting today? I hope I am not able to see everyone, but yes. Hi, Frances. Frances is the Executive Director of UCOBAC. UCOBAC implements programs to promote rights of women and children in Uganda, and they have been an implementing partner on the Securing Your Family's Future project together with KELIN. KELIN's program manager, who is here today, is Jessica Oluoch. Jessica is a legal officer who's been at the forefront of implementing the program Securing Your Family's Future. KELIN is the Kenya Legal and Ethics Network, and they do a lot of human rights-based litigation, public interest litigation, and we've worked with them for a long time. Sarah Arakala is a Maasai woman from Kilimanjaro, from Arusha, who is a program officer with the Pastoral Women's Council, but who is also, at the forefront of women's economic empowerment in Tanzania. Dr. Cleopatra Mujeni is the Regional Director for Africa Region, and I'm going to ask you, Dr. Cleopatra, to give some opening remarks at this point. Welcome.
Thank you, Naomi, and welcome everybody. Today, the International Center for Research on Women is pleased to join KELIN, UCOBAC, and PWC in welcoming you to this participatory webinar on land and property, safeguarding the rights of women. This webinar is anchored in lessons we have all learned from implementing and evaluating the Securing Your Family's Future program, and especially the course that was based and focused on men. And this intervention is a norm transformative intervention that promotes gender equality in women's access to land and property.
My name is Esther Naluguza, and I'm the Nutrition, Health, WASH Technical Lead for USAID ICANN.
The implementation of this project is a collaborative effort between the International Center for Research on Women, PWC, UCOBAC, KELIN, and has been funded by the Wellspring Philanthropic Fund. Around the world, land serves as a foundation for security, shelter, income, and potential gender equitable livelihoods. But the rights to land are not equitably distributed to all. And this is especially true for women. So why should women's land and property rights matter? If we consider the norms in our communities and the legal frameworks in our countries, we ask ourselves a few questions. Do women and men have equal ownership rights to immovable property? Do sons and daughters have equal rights to inherit assets from their parents? Do female and male surviving spouses actually have equal rights to inherit assets? And does the law grant spouses equal administrative authority over assets during marriage? Does the law provide for the valuation of non-monetary contributions? And what is the default marital property regime? So all these questions, we're going to be exploring them. And we know that while there may be legal frameworks in different countries, sometimes cultural, social, and community norms will actually override what the legal frameworks may be. We also know that there is a direct relationship between women's rights to land, their economic empowerment, household food security, and overall poverty reduction in communities. Women's land and property rights are therefore unquestionably vital to development. And yet, even with this, women still encounter persistent barriers to their land rights. Between 70 and 90% of all wealth in Africa is actually generated through land, but less than 10% of the land on the continent is owned by women. This is an unbelievable statistic that highlights the crucial role that women's land rights play in women's economic empowerment and the overall development of our communities and our countries. And these statistics also underscore the investment required to advance gender equality in this area. Never before has it become more critical to examine what works to advance women's economic empowerment, to examine and share the experience on what works to rebalance gender power relations, advance gender-sensitive development policies, and address gender discriminatory norms and practices for women's land rights and tenure security, as well as enhancing the effective control of resources. This webinar will provide us a platform to discuss measures instituted by various actors to protect women's economic justice and rights, as well as discuss the critical considerations that are necessary to uphold and protect women's rights to property in land. And in light of the situation we're all living through, the COVID-19 pandemic, we will also be looking at the impact of COVID-19 to women whose lives depend on land. How has it undermined women's access, ownership, and control over land and property? And what measures have been taken in the countries of study, as well as the countries of the participants here on this webinar, to promote women's land rights? How has COVID-19 impeded these efforts? How can women's land rights be protected in the context of disasters and pandemics? All key issues that we need to be tackling within this larger framework of thinking about women's land and property rights. As Naomi said, I'm Cleopatra Mujeni. I am the Director for the Africa Regional Office of the International Center for Research on Women. I welcome you all to this webinar and look forward to your active participation and the fruitful discussions that will be coming out of this. Back to you, Naomi. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cleopatra, for those remarks. And because we have somebody who's been working with our partners to come up with solutions, to design curricula, and to train the organizations and community members, paralegals in the communities, to work with us to advance the work of gender equality, to address social norms at the community level, I would like to introduce to you Lori. Lori Lorelli. Could you please make just a few remarks, very brief remarks, on how you you remember this work around addressing the economic rights of women by ensuring land tenure security and also getting the men on board? How did all this start?
Sure, thank you. Welcome to everyone. I'm calling in from New York. It's early in the morning here, 7 o'clock. Again, my name is Lori Roleri, and back in 2016, we started this partnership along with UCOBAC, KELIN, and PWC with the goal of developing some type of intervention that was very much aimed at changing social norms, in particular gender norms, around women's land and property rights. We started off our work in Uganda with a 2-day planning meeting where we developed a theory of change. And from there, prioritized, we used the socio-ecological model to help frame where we would begin, where we would enter the community. And after developing this theory of change, we needed to decide how would we implement it, what would be the interventions that we would use to realize that theory of change. And we very deliberately started with a curriculum, a group education intervention, starting with the men in communities. And largely because when you look at social norm change or shifting theory, it talks about the importance of reference groups. By reference groups, I mean people in the community who influence others in behaviors, in beliefs about what's okay and what's not okay with regard to women, in particular, this project, women's land rights. And so in many cases, it's the men that, or men in the community that set and maintain those norms. And so we, wanted to start first with that group, and then we moved to a similar group education intervention, but for women. And so the intervention generally either works simultaneously, working with men and then women, working with men and women simultaneously, or starting with the men to sort of fertilize the soil, so to speak, prioritize, get the soil ready to do this work, prepare the community, and then come in with the group education model for women. So with a brief, I was asked to keep my comments brief, but it's been an honor to work with this group since 2016 and be part of this team. I think we created 2 outstanding group education curricula that are easy to follow and at the same time very comprehensive. And we're in the midst now of also creating some other tools to complement the curriculum, like an evaluation guide, a community entry guide. We did some work on an implementation and a pre-testing guide. So it's ultimately going to be a very comprehensive suite of tools that people can use to shift social norms in their communities around women's land rights. Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you so much, Lori, and it's been a real pleasure, working with you from, reviewing the literature right from the beginning in Kampala and understanding that norms are not copy and paste, that they are contextualized, and that we have to actually integrate in the communities and immerse ourselves and understand that people actually mean well, but they may not recognize, what they are doing is doing harm to girls, to women, and to even men and boys, because securing your future, when your family is secure, you as a man, you're also doing so well. You'll be healthy, have some peace. So let's now go to Caroline Kayanja. Caroline Kayanja works with UCOBAC. UCOBAC is the organization that is implementing the Securing Your Family's Future program in Uganda, in Mityana to be specific. She's a project officer, very experienced in this work. They started out with, building awareness, and then they realized that everybody knew that, it's good to give women land rights, but then they didn't know how to do that. So she's been walking that journey, and she's going to tell us about how it's going and what they are learning. Dr. Caroline Ajema is a gender-based violence specialist based at ICRW Africa in Nairobi. It's a great pleasure to have you both, Caroline and Caroline Kayanja. So let's hear what you have to tell us about the Securing Your Future program, the intervention, as well as the work that ICRW has been doing to conduct the evaluation from the baseline at midline and the ongoing endline evaluation, and what we hope to learn from that. Over to you, Caroline. Caroline, please go ahead.
Allow me to carry on. Maybe she has network issues. So as has been mentioned, today we are gathered here to discuss a very important topic that touches not only on the lives of women and girls, but we're also looking at generations. And we come from a context where there's a lot of premium that is placed on land as an economic resource. And we know that in most of the countries represented here, women really hold a significant role in how, determining how the land is, the proceeds from the land, the impact in terms of how the land is utilized. But however, the social and cultural background that we come from really impedes the extent to which women are able to exercise control or even access some of these particular resources we are talking about. And the barriers here, in addition to them not having the ability to own the land itself, we also look at the customary laws that really make women not have say around what that land should be used for. And even in some contexts, we know that most of our land belongs to the communities, and women are not considered to be the rightful owners of such communal land. In addition, that in as much as we have lots of legal frameworks that have been put in place to protect the rights of women in terms of access and utilization of land, we realize that enforcement really remains an issue. It remains an issue in terms of there's so many hurdles that women have to go through before they access these particular rules. And looking at it from a gender perspective, we know that in some of the communities, in as much as we're in this generation or in this century, we still have that perception that land belongs to a man. So the man has to make, majority of the decisions regarding how that particular land is meant to be used. So this is what really informed this particular project, as Lori and Naomi have talked about. So you're looking at the foundational realities of the communities and how then these need to be transformed by engaging everyone and looking at the different entry points that we can have people come in on board and address women land rights. So as you're talking about women land rights, it's not just about the ability to own, but it's about them being able to use, to access, to control, to transfer, and to inherit this land, and even go a step further to make decisions regarding land. So we are looking at it holistically. What needs to be done to ensure that we get to that space? So this particular project is when it was implemented as a collaboration. So we have Lori, who was the lead in terms of developing the curricula together with the partners, thinking through the methodology, thinking through the approaches that would really enable us get to the gist of this particular intervention. Then we had key implementing partners one from Kenya, we had a partner from Uganda and Tanzania. So in Tanzania, we had the Pastoral Women's Council that really works closely with the indigenous Maasai communities. And we know that the context there is also different. In Uganda, we had the Uganda Community Based Association for Women and Children. So then they're also looking at the rural constituents in Uganda and what are those dynamics that needed to be changed. In Kenya, we had KELIN, the Kenya Legal Ethical Issues Networks on HIV and AIDS. And for them, they're also working in Kisumu and Homa Bay. So you're looking at diversity in terms of East Africa, diversity in terms of the geographical regions that we covered. So we as ICRW were brought in on board as an evaluation partner to look at the extent to which the norms that had been stipulated were transformed, at what point were these changes, notable, and what needs to be done differently, even as we think about scaling up this particular intervention. In terms of the curriculum, what modules need to be added therein to enable us move forward with a module or a package that has been well refined. So someone may wonder, what is this securing your family's future course? And for this discussion, we are focusing on the men, because Lori has been able to develop several curriculums, one for couples, one for leaders, but today we are focusing on the Securing Your Family Futures course for men. So the goal of this course was to increase women's access to, use of, ownership, control, and decision-making about land. And the curriculum was designed in such a way that it was a 12-hour course, but split in terms of implemented in 2-hour sessions, depending with the community. There are those who, we wanted to get perceptions from the community, whether they would be okay in having meeting over a period of 3 weeks or over a period of 6 weeks. But in total, they needed to cover the 12 hours. And our target was adult men in the communities that I've talked about, and especially those who hold power and they set norms around land. So with the intention of ensuring that once we have these men understand the importance of women having access to, and having control over the land as a resource, then they will be able to see transformation within the communities. And part of the methodology basically required a lot of interaction with the participants, looking at the values and beliefs, and then going a step further to establish what are those peer norms among the men that needed also to be changed. Next slide.
Let's have Carol. Carol, welcome back. Are you able to speak now?
Thank you.
Sorry, I hope you can hear me.
Please.
Can you hear me?
Carol, let's to speak. Yes. Thank you.
I bet my video is off because of my network. Hi, everyone. I welcome you all to this webinar. Sorry for the disorganization. My internet is on and off. But as Kara said, thank you, Carol, for stepping in. As Kara said, so we are implementing the SYFF for men, the Securing Your Family's Future course for men. And in 2018, the whole process started with the fear of change, where we see the goal. The goal is actually to support women access, use, and have control over land. And we came up with behaviors that we want to see women and men engage in or do, and then the determinants to those behaviors, and then the different activities that support the changes that we want to see in the communities that we work with. So we went through the co-creation of course curricula, feedback here and there, then putting the course logistics that would support the implementation of the course. Then the implementation team, and those are the 3 partners from UCOBAC, PWC, and KELIN, had a number of meetings and trainings to see that they can do this work in the communities. Then the development of research protocol, and that is where ICRW comes in. And then ICRW supported us in the baseline assessment in the 3 countries. So straight from there, we went to the piloting of the intervention, and we had the selection and training of course facilitators. The special bit of the course is that the men do support fellow men. So we have male facilitators training the male groups. We went through the selection of course participants and pre-qualification. This comes with the orientation of course participants. Before engaging them, you brief them about the course, and they consent to the participation in the course. Then the M&E system setup. We have the feedback forms. We have a number of forms that help us track that work in the community. Then the training of the maid. This course for men has 6 sessions, and these 6 sessions have 2 hours each. And so that means that the groups of men were met 6 times. Then we went through the action-oriented exit plans. The participants have to really come up with what they feel would change in their homes and plan for that, and fill out the goal maps that we would follow up during the probably the midline or documentation of success stories. We wanted participants to actually feel like these interventions would change their families. So we do the donor reporting and scale up from there. So the baseline, ideally in UCOBAC, we are able to meet 120 men, and KELIN was able to meet 300 men, and PWC was able to meet 200 men. Next slide. So the course came up with the norms that it's addressing, and these are the norms. These norms were the inequitable norms and and how we want them to change to the equitable norms. So one of the norms is in Africa is that women are not entitled to own land, and we want to see that both men and women can own land. Another inequitable norm is that men should be the decision makers of the families, and we want to see that there is joint decision making in these families. There is a norm that men should lead community decisions, but the course wants to see or works towards women and men being capable of making meaningful participation in community-based decision making. Another inequitable norm that the course wants to change is that women should not be educated about land rights, and the course is working towards seeing that women should be educated about land rights if they are to enjoy their band of rights. Another inequitable norm is that women do not know how to manage land, and we think that managing land requires education, and that is the work that we are doing, that if men and women are educated about land and land rights, they are capable of managing their land. Paying bride price means that the husband owns the wife. The course works towards seeing that bride price does not make a woman a property, and so she's still entitled to her rights. Men are superior. We want to see that men and women are equal human beings. So thank you all. Carol will take it from there.
Next slide.
Over to you, Carol Ajema.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, we had a theory of change that we were really focusing on in doing the evaluation for this particular course. I will not read through this. Our end result was to get to a point whereby, as a result of persons engaging within this course, we would get to a point where there was increase in women's ownership and access to land. That is what we are working towards. And there are critical behaviors that we really have been monitoring and looking at evaluating to see the extent to which the men who had been trained are moving towards that behavior. So allow me just to read one that speaks towards fathers being able to allocate land to their daughters regardless of their marital status, and also looking at the land management structures, areas where land belongs to the community. Have we moved to a point whereby women within those communities are also able to sit within the land management boards or committees, and even land being able to be allocated to them for use? Next slide, please. Next slide. So I'll take us through, we did some most significant change story exercise last year in Kenya and Uganda. We are currently undertaking the same in Tanzania. So we just lifted a few stories, but we'll be able to share the rest of the stories after the webinar once we have those finalized. So for this particular individual from Tanzania, Stephen, and the change that for him stood out Kindly go back. The change that stood out for Stephen was in terms of land allocation and being able to make a will that to include his wife and children, so that then it's clear from the documentation perspective, should anything happen to him, his family will be secured by ensuring that all the details are captured within their land properties that they own as a family. The next slide, please. In Uganda still, for this particular individual, initially he started off by saying that the wife never really knew when and he bought land. So it was all about privacy whenever he acquired properties. But as a result of the training, he not only bought land in her name, but he also realized the importance of, ensuring that the girls and the boys in his family not only attain the education, but are also having the right to inherit the property, courtesy of, the knowledge that he gained during the training. So there's a change in terms of land ownership and gender roles, and also the social changes. Next slide. For this particular man from Kenya, for him, he started off from a content whereby there's a lot of taboo insofar as writing a will is concerned from the community that he's coming from. And the notion being that when you write a will, it's as though you're preparing for your death. So his story here was really speaking towards ensuring that other men know the importance of writing a will and how that serves to secure the family's future should something happen to the breadwinner. And he's gonna step ahead to train other men within the community for them to understand the importance of women having access to land and also the importance of them having the will, in place, just to outline the properties that the family owns. The next slide. For this individual here who was a pastor, he, in addition just to having land, for him, he made a different step compared to the other men. He went and co-registered the land with his wife. And he also looked at the genesis of why certain tradition and practices persist. And he thought for him, the reference group that he needed to reach out to was his father. So that the father, rather than just reaching out to men within his age group, he went backwards to look at how his father would then also be able to tap into the knowledge he had gained and whether then he would be able to, have some of the, knowledge transferred impact upon his own family. The next slide. So for the PWC team, the implementation that is happening in Tanzania, as I've said, we are currently documenting the individual stories from the men. So this is just a collection of what has so far happened within that community and coming from a space whereby land in Maasai really is communal owned. So yeah, we've had 251 women allocated land by their husbands. There are those who've even gone a step further to bequeath land to their daughters. And courtesy of this training, we also continue to see more men within the community trained on how to write a will, which is not a practice within that particular community. And looking at the, the women who continue to get ownership over the community land. So for us, even as we move on to the next slide, it's for us to say there's a lot of impact that this training has resulted into. So today for us is just to discuss on what are the gains that have been made and how can these gains be sustained even as we're looking at the current pandemic we are at, and moving forward, how do we secure the rights of women over land and property? Over to you, Naomi, and thank you so much, everyone else.
Thank you very much, Caroline Kayanja and Caroline Ajema. Very insightful submissions, and it is so good to see those stories. The pictures tell such a beautiful story. Seeing a Maasai woman with a title is really very inspiring. So kindly note the questions that you have for the speakers. We'll have a time downline where you can get a chance to ask them and to get a response. So this webinar is really focusing on how the actors in this area have instituted various innovations to cope with the gender equality that limits women's economic justice and rights, and also come up with some critical considerations that are necessary to uphold and protect women's rights to property and land. We have a panelist, we have a group of panelists. We have people that are coming from Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, and they are going to be giving us their expert views on some of the discussion points that we have here. So I'm going to ask Maimuna. Maimuna will be talking to us about the status of women's land and property rights. Please, I don't know, I thought actually the video would be showing them in person. Can you switch on your videos, please? Maimuna, Anna, and Jacqueline. Please switch on your videos so that the audience can see you.
Hello, Naomi, it's Maimuna. We had exchanged who will do the first question, and it's going to be Anna. I'll do the second one.
No problem.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So let me introduce you first. So the lady you see with the hand up is Anna Mugwira. She's the former regional commissioner for Kilimanjaro region in Tanzania. Welcome, Anna.
Asante, asante.
Our next panelist is Maimuna Kanyamara, founder of Mikono Yetu, but she has also played a very critical role in forming Kivulini. I'm sure you have all probably heard about Kivulini in Tanzania, doing great work around preventing violence against women. Welcome, Maimuna.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Jacqueline is a regional coordinator for Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. Jacqueline, you look great, and thank you for coming. Doing a lot of work, even during this COVID time, monitoring what's going on. Okay, so we'll proceed to the questions. Yes, so just wave to the audience, and then we'll proceed to the questions. So let's talk to Anna. Please put up the questions again so the audience can remember which questions are there. Yes. So Anna, please, you've been in this field for such a long time. And we know, just like Caroline has just talked to us, that land rights in the land tenure system in Tanzania may be slightly different from the system in Uganda and Kenya. What is the status of women's land and property rights in your country currently?
Yes. Asante, moderator. Yes, we may be a little bit different from the others in the region and maybe elsewhere, but we may not be very different as where women are concerned, in the sense that our constitution, our laws are very much in favor of women's rights, and their status is clear in the legal framework. But the problem that we have that deny women this a valuable part of their life is the practice, the social cultural norms that deny women the right to own land, access land, use land. They can use land, but you only use it for your family when you are not married yet, or for your husband after you're married, or for your children if you happen to be single for one reason or another. So, so yes, the status is the same where women are concerned in other countries as well, that we still are fighting. Maybe we are better in percentage-wise, that at least we have gone to 9% women owning land, having access to land, inheriting land. And there are changes here and there from various communities, and especially from matrilineal society communities that we have about 2, 3, 4, 5 here, where women have the right to own property. So they also do inherit land, they have properties, they have hotels, they can manage businesses, but not in the rest. And you know, Tanzania is big. We have more than 144 communities of indigenous communities. So with only 1 or 2 having access, that doesn't mean the whole tribe. It's only a few people whose parents gave them access to such opportunities. The rest are still fighting their way out. So you find women working on the land, you find women working on the mines, but they don't own the mine. They only use it for the person that either employs them or for the person that they respond to or they report to. So it's either a landlord or a husband or a father or a caretaker. So when it comes to the status, we're still fighting. Even our land law is very much in favor. Women can own land. It says very clearly, explicitly, no problem. But when it comes to how many women actually do own land, do access land as their own property, that is a big question. So even the marriage law allows women to own land, allows girls to own land. But when it comes to tradition, you're not allowed even to own a cow or a goat, not only land. So any kind of property. But women are kind of finding their own way of fighting their way out when they find that they are not protected by the traditions. Women have started their own ways of protecting themselves, finding ways of coping with not owning, but maybe controlling some assets. But that is taking a very slow pace among professional women. And the rest are still under the mercy of activists, of change of traditions, of religion, where religion offers that opportunity. Often religion is also against women. So we're the same. We're very much the same, except that the laws in Tanzania are very much in favor. Now, how many women can use the law? Do they have the time to do that? It's luxury for a woman in the village to go to court and to question any matter that involves land, even where they know that they do have the capacity, they can table their case out, but then they are not protected. A few organizations that work for women have started this movement a few years ago now. We've gone for about 20, 30 years, but still we are only on 9%. So I would say the legal status is fine, the social status is not.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. You've said very important things, that for a woman to actually go to court is a luxury, and that's really, really very sad, because we, as Cleopatra said, over 70% of agricultural income comes from agriculture by women. However, only 10% own land, and therefore, for the fact that they cannot actually even go to claim the right to own, even when the law already caters for that, is very sad. And really talking about assets, let's come to Ken. Ken, what is the status of women's land and property rights from your experience working with widows at KELIN?
Thank you, Naomi. Good afternoon, everyone. The status of, I'm joining in with a different machine, but I'm ready to proceed. The status of women land and property rights in our country is somehow a sorry one. Looking at the statistics that we are having currently, women hold 1% of the total titles issued in our country, and we have another 5% on holding land jointly with their spouses, I would say, or with the other men. This is against or does not meet the provisions of our law. We have very progressive law. The Constitution provides for equal opportunities, and men and women have that ability or are eligible to owning land either individually or with another person of their choice. So looking at the 1% and 5%, we can say a total of 6% out of 100 are holding land, and that is not equitable occupation of land or ownership of land in our country. So it's not gender equitable. Moving forward, with that knowledge of 1% owning the land, we find that 89% of subsistence farming or workforce for subsistence cultivation is provided by women, and for cash crop growing, 70% of the workforce are women. So reflecting on the ownership and the group that works the most on the land, we find that it is not equitable. Then there is need for intervention. And what could be contributing to this position or this condition? One, we have some discriminative law. For example, our law of succession, which is currently under review, at some point it provides that at some section, that would be section 35, that when a woman or a widow remarries, then she loses her life interest in the estate. And for the gentleman, this is not the position. So you find that women are disenfranchised by this aspect of the law. Secondly, we have a constitution recognizing families and providing that a couple is equal before marriage, during marriage, and at the dissolution of marriage. This is an issue that is not replicated in one of the statutes in our country, that is the Matrimonial Properties Act, where the Act provides for sharing or distributing property after at dissolution of marriage according to contribution. So there is a question of what position should we take? Should we go with the Constitution as that provides for equal opportunity, or do we go with the position of the statute, which is subsidiary, is a subset of the Constitution, or should conform to the Constitution? Fortunately, this is a question that is being, this is a statement that is being challenged, and soon the courts will make a pronunciation on that provision. Further, we have discriminative or biased cultural practices. Our communities, most of the communities in Kenya are patrilineal, in that men have the bigger say, and where men are making such decisions, women do not get much out of the property that is being shared. Therefore, we find that women are disenfranchised in the sense that you find that most property are shared along the line, or are shared by the male, but pardon?
Patrilineal, yeah, patrilineal, yes.
Yes. So so that we find that most men do get the end up in sharing the property, while their sisters or mothers are disenfranchised, in that the culture, as they say it, this does not provide for women holding property in their name. But this is a position that it is not the actual position, as it is a blend of what people thought to be culture and part of westernization, because in culture as it is, you find that we did not have title deeds for a title deed system or a land title system. People would move in and clear a piece of land and they would occupy that. But with the introduction of registration, we find that men had the opportunity, or they have saved that opportunity, that title deeds should be registered in the man's name, and that disenfranchise women in that should the marriage. Pardon?
Let me cut you short, and I apologize, but because we know that Eunice is also a lawyer, and Jackie is also a lawyer, so let's also give them a chance to build on the legal and regulatory framework. And of course, the area of policy is also quite interesting. So I'm going to ask Eunice. Eunice is from Uganda. People didn't know that you're from Kenya. So thank you for that elaborate contribution and for the role that KELIN is playing on the succession bill. So Eunice, what do you have to say about what Anna and Ken have said? And please keep it brief.
Oh, thank you, Naomi. Yes, the situation in Uganda is actually not so different from Tanzania and Kenya, from what I've heard from colleagues. Yeah. So in Uganda, we have really a progressive legal framework that favors women's land rights. So for example, I will just highlight a few things. A woman in Uganda can own land individually or in partnership with others. A woman can own land in any of the 4 tenure systems. A woman has a right to transact, to make any kind of transact on the land, any kind of transaction on the land that they own. And then they can also own land as individuals, family, or as a community. So really the legal framework is progressive and protects the rights of women. But then the question comes, why is it that we still have 7% of women in Uganda, only 7% of women in Uganda owning land? That's the whole question. So when I look at this whole issue, it's more of how can we empower the women to actually own the land? So we still have to look at the ways through which women acquire land in Uganda. This, for example, includes purchase, inheritance. It includes maybe gifting by virtue of marriage. And so many women actually think that by virtue of being a woman, you have a right to own land. No, it goes back to how do you acquire this right? So we find that we have issues in Uganda whereby, for example, women are not really very well sensitized. They are not alive to the kind of legal framework that we have in place when it comes to land rights of women. So for example, when a woman gets married and they are legally married, there is this thinking that they automatically get entitled to own the land. But the position of the law is actually different, whereby the Constitution has said you own individually or in partnership with others. So there is need to sensitize more of the women to actually see how they can get this right to own land. Then I will talk about the norms and the customs. The legal framework, as I said, is very good because it provides for customary land registration. And I think Uganda takes a lead in this, whereby women can own land in perpetuity under customary tenure. And this customary tenure forms 80% of the land in Uganda. And most of this land is unregistered. So when we look at the statistics, we also have to be careful because we have to ask ourselves, these statistics, are they based on the registered land? And I've told you 20% of the land is only registered in Uganda. But when we get into the arena of customary land, it is actually very interesting that women have a right to own land in perpetuity. So for women under customary arrangements, we started the project of registering customary land actually in 2016, and we have noted very good results. The customs and traditions, the norms, the misconceptions and all that. So when you dig deeper, you actually realize that we have so many good customs and traditions that favor women's land ownership. But how we approach the whole issue is what really matters. For example, I'll give you an example of Acholi sub-region in Uganda. They will tell you that our communities are potentially polygamous communities, and that dates way back. So how do they actually identify the land that owns to which kind of woman? The land is traced through the women. So as a land administrator and as a lawyer, when you go on the ground, you have to listen more and be like, okay, so if the customs say the land is traced through the woman, how do I now register when it comes to register? Obviously, the woman must be registered. And how best can we protect the rights of women, rather than just documenting them and empowering the women with the legal documentations that they will need to actually support their rights. So basically that is it in Uganda, and maybe we could throw more light later, but that's basically what I can say.
Thank you very much, Eunice. And of course, I cheated you out of an introduction. Eunice is a lawyer. She's studying. She's doing further studies to also add on qualifications in human rights, and she works at the Ministry of Lands in Uganda. So she actually knows what she's talking about, and I'm learning quite a lot. So I'm going to move to the next question, and we are going to talk about ways in which the pandemic has actually affected women land rights in your country. What measures have you taken in Kilimanjaro? And I confuse Kilimanjaro with Arusha, but I know that sometimes you have to take a flight. So in 1 minute, Maimuna, what has been the most striking impact of COVID-19 in impeding the efforts to promote women's land rights?
Thank you, Naomi. In terms of timing, I would say very briefly to say that, as earlier said, we have very much in terms of legal reforms, and we have very strong statements from our current president in terms of land rights, and also from our Minister of Lands. And also there are different changes. For example, there is reduced the cost for processing land. And also recently, it's almost yesterday, the government has emphasized, and it's the president who has said that we needed to reduce the interest rate of the bank so that loans can be much easier paid. Saying that in terms of the foundation, in terms of the measures, it's different. A number of organizations and the government itself has emphasized on that. But what I want to say, in addition to the dilemmas that have already been said in 3 countries, in terms of COVID-19, it's almost like adding salt to the existing injury, because already we have good policies, but the dilemmas are still existing. Now, with the coming of COVID, it's almost adding salt into the injury.
Thank you.
Let me explain a little bit. Majority of the women, particularly in the rural areas, are not aware in terms of the positive progressive laws. And with the COVID-19, with all the restrictions, we are not able to go into the community to inform women about their rights to own land and property. And also there are women who had taken loans from the bank and they lost their businesses, and now the bank are on their neck and they cannot negotiate because they don't know, and they are losing their properties because they don't know how to negotiate. But also what is really striking is how do we get women to be informed of their rights? We cannot celebrate with 90%, but now with the COVID, even the progress that we have realized is dwindling down. So in terms of the time, but those are the issues that COVID has added salt to the injury. Thanks, Naomi.
Thank you so much. And of course, we, as Ken had said, he touched on the issue of inheritance rights, whereby girls actually who are heirs and could be locked at home could actually be coerced to sign away their rights by relatives, because girls are not supposed to inherit. So for fathers who choose to allocate, property to their daughters, this COVID situation may be affecting even young girls as well as women. So I'm going to go to Jackie. Jackie, you are a human rights at the Human Rights Commission in Kenya. What can you say before I come to Titi to talk about the last question about how the property rights can be assured at pandemics? Jackie, what's experience regarding the COVID-19 and women's land rights?
Okay, I wish to associate myself with the sentiments shared by previous speakers, that we have very progressive laws, but when it comes to social acceptance, that is where the problem is. So with coming of COVID-19, it found women in a situation where they were worse, but now this COVID-19 brought them in a worse off situation because they were already struggling with ensuring that they are able to achieve land rights, but with COVID-19, it put them in a very awkward situation. And just to maybe give the general feedback from the Ministry of Health, more men have been affected by COVID-19 compared to women. If you look at the deaths and the number of positive cases, it's around 70 and 30. So 30% women, 70% men. And the average age of persons who've died are within the age of 40 to 49 and 30 to 39. So you are talking about an age where people are married and have families. So there are a number of widows who have been left behind. And also just going back to the other speakers' feedback, is that most of the women in Kenya enjoy secondary rights. So they will have access or control of land through their fathers, through their husband, through their sons. So when you have a situation where we have orphans, we have widows, then it presents a problem which is directly associated with COVID-19. The other issue is that we have seen women take up a lot of care, home-based care, and just care, general care to the families. So children were out of school for some time, men who were unwell had to stay home and the women were taking care of them. And this then brings the conversation of non-monetary contribution towards support or towards acquisition of matrimonial property. So that presents an opportunity for us to keep the discussion on non-monetary contribution when it comes to acquisition of matrimonial property. So as a commission, we have been monitoring the human rights situation in the country during the COVID-19 pandemic. We have launched 2 reports. If parties are interested, they can go to our website, knchr.com. They'll see the report. And the second report, which was launched this year, was specific to the vulnerable population, including women. So more women were evicted than men because they were not able to take care of themselves and families. Those ones were in urban areas, so they were evicted. Women and men who were living on government land were evicted despite the government issuing a moratorium and other UN agencies giving advisories against eviction. So women were evicted from government land. The other issue on would be on service provision. So most government offices were closed. Women who needed to pursue legal redress could not go to court. If they needed to establish ownership status, the lands offices were closed. I am aware the Ministry of Agriculture came up with an e-voucher and certain incentives for farmers to enhance food production. But if you look at the processes that they required were so technical that most women would not be able to get to that. During the pandemic, there was also a lot of urban-rural migration. So the demand for land at the rural area was high, bringing a lot of conflict. So those are the challenges that would say were witnessed, that the situation of women land rights during the pandemic has become worse off as compared to before the pandemic.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline, and I hope that you can people will see the link that you've talked about. And of course, there's somebody talking about informality of marriage, and we know that, you know, to be considered a wife and a legal, you know, wife, then you have to actually get married and get documented. So those are issues that we need to keep our eyes on as we plan to move into the breakaway sessions. But before we go to the breakaway sessions and answer some questions, I'm going to ask Titi to tell us about, you know, from her experience, how can land and property rights of women be secured in pandemic situations such as this COVID-19. There have been other, you know, pandemics, and there will probably be more. How can we, going forward, make this very bad situation get resuscitated and not continue to suffer?
Thank you so much. I absolutely agree with the previous panelist, and thank you so much for sharing, because I think it's a regional perspective on what's happening to the women in the community. But allow me to appreciate the fact there's been a spike of sexual gender-based violence in the communities that is linked to service provision in terms of livelihoods for the vulnerable communities where we are now. You find that women and girls are locked up in their houses. And so issues of incest are on the rise. And so these are critical issues that we call upon different actors to indulge with and also allocate resources. Back to the question, I think it is very fundamental for the partner states herein to really uphold the rights of women and girls in terms of access to land, ownership, and protection from sexual gender-based violence. This is very critical. And so it stems from the international commitments that the partner states have made. And so the pandemic has really proved to states that we need to put our houses to order. For instance, we need to call upon the ministries. The line ministries need to coordinate better. Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Gender, Ministry of Lands. How do we ensure that we adopt and integrate into our systems practical solutions to protect women's land rights? And so this requires striking a balance between the health rights of the people we're talking about, but also looking at the economic implication of the pandemic. So you realize that women have been disenfranchised during this period, and it's at this point that we expect the different agencies to develop long-term, short-term, and different strategies towards responding to both COVID-19 as well as women's access to land at different levels. So this requires adopting a human rights-based approach where we are looking at the rights of vulnerable people. For instance, there are persons with disabilities. They cannot access the markets, but you find that the restrictions that have been put in place do not allow anyone to move.
So I think it's very important that we are really realistic to the conditions of the people we represent, but also be quite gender sensitive. I'll give an example of the economic stimulus. Governments have adopting special packages to different vulnerable groups. But you find that the inclusion of women and girls is very critical. At this point in time, we have child mothers. And so the packages should be quite sensitive to the conditions that they are going through. We have widows, but you find that their interests are not taken care of. So it's very critical for the members of parliament to really integrate gender sensitive programming and resourcing towards the different budgetary allocations towards addressing the root causes of COVID in the community, the impact, and how we can move forward. So at this point in time, I would request that we adopt a psychosocial support mechanism that responds both to the COVID-19 pandemic, but also the previous issues that were existing, like gender-based violence in the communities. So you find that we have to bring services closer to the people, okay? The restrictions on movement are very curtailing, whereby people have to travel long distances to get vaccine. And when you reach there, the vaccines are not there, okay? So how is government planning to bring the vaccination processes down to the local person in the community? And so different actors need to come together to design programs and frameworks to ensure that we deliver services to the people within the community. And so there is also a need for increased awareness on COVID-19 and the rights of women at this point in time. You'll find that not many people are aware of the preventive and response mechanisms of COVID-19, as well as issues affecting communities in terms of women access to land. And so you find that some services are closed at the moment, like women cannot access the police stations, the service centers are closed, for instance, the courts of law. So issues to do with innovations in addressing the problems that were there before COVID needs to be heightened at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Titi, and the activist in you. I could not, keep away from talking about the domestic violence that's going on, the early marriage, and I think all this is really related. So we are moving to the next chapter, which is breakout rooms. And in these breakout rooms, you have a bit more time to add on to the conversation that has started out here. So there are 3 breakout rooms, and if you look at the bottom of your screens, there's that second last button, which has like 4 squares. You can click on it and choose which breakout room you want to go to. We are going to give you 20 minutes. So 20 minutes, moderators, please take notes. I think we have exhausted the question of, what the situation is and was, and what has happened. So let's focus on looking at opportunities for taking this situation from strength to strength, and come up with some opportunities for engagement, both as partners, but also in looking at issues that are still pending and making the situation worse. Everybody is now back here. And I hope you had very good deliberations in the breakout sessions. I know that there was a lot to be captured, but we will not get time to answer every question. But I've been watching the chat, and we'll be able to provide some responses after reading it post this meeting. However, I'm going to ask Eunice. Eunice, just one takeaway point, and please use not more than 2 minutes. What did you take away from the session on opportunities for engagement?
Thank you very much, Naomi. Yes, from what I get from the session, we really need to engage more with the women. We need to empower the women. We need to continue recognizing the kind of vulnerable state the women are in, the fact that their rights are still, they still need to be supported to actually own, hold, use, and really claim for their land rights. And then we also need to understand the fact that with COVID, there is need to prepare further than how we have been handling our land matters, because anytime a pandemic can come and so many issues to do, for example, with the evictions, to do with these justice systems and all those things that have been happening normally will actually not be happening the same way they were. So we need to prepare further and be able to be prepared for any kind of eventuality that might come up. Yes.
Okay. KELIN, can I give you 1 minute strictly? What's your takeaway from your session, your breakout session? And please stick to the point.
Okay, thank you, Naomi. Our takeaway was there is need to do more in empowering women, not just by enacting laws, but it is time to go beyond policy and get women create awareness creation is one of the avenues that should be explored. Secondly, there's need to find a way for to support or promote use of alternative dispute resolution where there are disputes so as to have restorative justice. And thirdly, there was a need for women to take up more active role in the leadership spaces so that they can influence the policies or decisions that affect them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'll go to Anna. Anna, I know in the session that you had quite, some significant points around readiness. So what did you take away in terms of, we see women in Maasai, the Maasai women, they are now ready. They have acquired some property. What next? What next?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, we need to look into that because we said the laws and constitutions and regulations are very fair. It's only that the social cultural, the implementation part that is missing, and that eventually causes the gender-based violence, even in the midst of emergencies such as this one. So several ways can be applied to mitigate. One, I think, is for us to unpack the laws and make the laws known to the target group, to the women, even to the men, who are men as well as, discriminated and maybe violated just as women are. Then we need also to tackle the legal hurdles. What are the legal hurdles? Which part of the law, which part of the constitution causes problems for us to operationalize the practice? Secondly, I think we need to lobby parliamentarians who make the laws to follow up on the implementation of such laws. They can't just be making laws and then the laws are not implemented and they sit quietly. So we need to remind them that this law, yes, you passed it, you enacted it, it's fine, but it's not being realized. The target groups are not benefiting from the existing laws. And thirdly, we need also to lobby the judiciary itself, follow up on the laws that it manages on a daily basis. What do they see in the judiciary? Are they happy that the laws they administer really do justice to this group, to the women, to the children who are affected by different types of emergencies, including COVID-19? We need the gender-based data, as someone said. I think that will help us to know the magnitude of the problem, but also we need to bring the services closer to the people. So these are the few that I could mention. And in addition to that, we need to look into the economic power of the women. If if I have something else, maybe I don't own land, but I have some money in the bank, I have some property elsewhere, I can manage for a while when I'm still organizing myself when an emergency occurs. But the economic thing and the allocation of fund that we are talking about, that we hear, for instance, of all this money coming in as part of emergency response to COVID, maybe part of it could go to the allocation of a specific fund that NGOs can access, so that they bring the message closer to the people, because we are the ones who are closer to the people. So with these few remarks, this one I already mentioned, that the services then will come closer to the people. The information will be provided, and once people have information, they will know really what to choose, what to take, what not to take, and so on. And women are really coming up very strongly.
Thank you. Anna, thank you so much. I'm sorry, I have to cut you off because of time. We need now to be able to wrap up this and ask ourselves, what can we do to continue to protect the rights of women over land and over property, especially in pandemics. So I'm going to go to you, Jackie. Jackie, please, in 2 minutes, kindly summarize, and then we will be moved to the next. Jackie, in Kenya.
Thank you. Listening to all speakers since the beginning of this session, it shows the program, the SYFF program has a very positive, sorry, my apologies, I had put on switched off my video. So it shows that engaging communities directly, the social aspects of women land rights is very important. So for women land rights to be realized, they must not only be legally recognized, but also socially recognized. So how do we then engage the social networks for them to understand the law? And how do we support the women who are brave enough to use the law to create change? So that is a good avenue within which we can look out and support the women. The other issue would be on the COVID-19 pandemic. It has shown the reality which women have been speaking for many years. When the government says work from home, the women have been able to do it. They have supported the sick persons in the home. They have continued to provide services. So how do we then start documenting or appreciating this type of work, which for a long time has not been considered as work? That would be the second issue. And lastly, when we are rebuilding, or when we're coming up with efforts to see how we can move forward after the COVID-19, or as we integrate COVID-19 within our work, is how do we bring the voice of women? And as a human rights practitioner, I always say, let's apply the human rights-based approach mechanism. That's the Panther: participation, accountability, non-discrimination, and all those other mechanisms to ensure that we realize this, the rights of women. It's not a choice. We just have to ensure that we respect women's land rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jackie, and my apologies. I'm not going to be able to ask all of you the questions that I thought I would, ask you. At this juncture, I would like to ask Jackson. Jackson is representing the UN Women Country Representative from Uganda. Give us some remarks as we wind up our business here. Are you on?
Do you hear me?
Yes,
Hello.
my apologies. And are you able to put on your video?
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
My network is very bad, so I don't know whether the video will work, but let me try.
Okay.
Hello.
And it's raining today, so it's
I think it might be
wonky, but I will go ahead and introduce you.
Yeah, it is.
I'll go ahead and introduce you. Enoch Mugabe works as a women's economic empowerment specialist at UN Women. He's been in the field, has worked with ActionAid International Malawi, and has worked with the UNDP. He really specializes in inclusive development and gender. So please go ahead and give us the closing remarks. Enoch, are you able to give us your remarks? Okay, so I'm going to have to step in for you and really thank you for.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Yes, my network is very bad. It's raining here for one reason or the other when it rains, but I'm back. I hope it works out.
Okay, please go ahead, use audio. We can hear you.
Yes. Yeah, I'm
In
using audio. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity. My name is Enoch Mugabe. I've been introduced. I would like to thank the organizers of this meeting, that it is very timely, especially now that we are going through the hard times brought about by the COVID pandemic. I would like to emphasize two quick things in the interest of time. That the situation of women land rights is very critical because land is a factor of production. Land is a factor of production and it is fixed. Well, that brings in the element of scarcity, land grabbing, because it is very, very, very valuable. So we need to make sure that all the legal processes and other requirements are put in place for the women who are, in this case, vulnerable because of the patriarchal structures, to ensure that they are protected to own and control land. Because as it has already been said, like in Uganda, agriculture is the mainstay of the economy, and it is mainly done on land. 80% of our food, 90 comes from agriculture. Agriculture contributes to 70% of the labor force, and of that, 80% are women. So it's a livelihood issue, although it is also a human rights issue. Two, women are not homogeneous. When we are designing policies, we need to know that intersectionality is very, very critical. We need to ensure that we have the required data for all sectionalities of the women, such that when we are planning, it's not a one size fits all. We need to know those who are married. We need to know the youth. We need to know those in a polygamous relationship. We need to know those who are rural, urban. How are they affected? So that is also very critical. The third one is that, which I've talked about, in relation to data. Our countries or development partners, we need to invest in the gender statistics, not only on land, but also other issues. But for this case, let me emphasize land. We need to have data for planning. Data is very difficult to get, for instance, in Uganda. And the one we have is a bit outdated. So reliable gender statistics is going to be critical for planning. For instance, how many women are on land under the a certain tenure system, and which type of women? Then we can be able to plan. We can be able to put programs and also ensure that effective policies are put in place. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, if we are to succeed in this, male engagement is critical. I liked the first presentations and the curricula where men were engaged. I have a good example here where we promote climate smart agriculture in one of our regions in Uganda. And what we did, because we are promoting technologies and the enterprise perennial fruit growing, we engaged the men and they were able to accept and even sign an agreement offering that land for the use of this, for this woman to own and control the produce over a period of years. And you know, these fruits take a long time. They are perennial, almost 30 years. And it was witnessed by the district. So for me, male engagement is key. Let's not only equip our women with rights, not only men, both have to be equipped. And also we have to demonstrate that gender equality works for everybody, and land rights for women is a key cornerstone for women's empowerment, for gender equality, and for inclusive growth and development. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and thank you for giving us this opportunity. Over to you.
Thank you, Enoch Mugabe, and take back our regards to UN Women, especially the UN Women Uganda team. And we look forward to continuing this discussion and finding out how we can carry forward the work on securing your family's future program, going beyond the men, but also looking at now the research and evidence that you have hinted at, and how we can continue to unearth those things that are not quite visible to the people who actually hold the power to plan and make policies for women. Thank you all so much for coming. I will be inviting you again. This topic, we've just scratched the surface, and we hope to be able to invite you again in a few months. Please come again. And